This is the beginning of the seventh parak of Masechet Brachot, Daf Mem Hey Amud Aleph, and shortly after the Mishnah, the Gemara begins. Amar Rav Chanan bar Abba, Minayin laona amein, shelo yagbia kolo yoter min hamavarech. From where do we know that the person saying amein to a bracha should not raise his voice to be louder than the person making the bracha himself? Shneimar, because it says in the Torah, Galu laHashem iti, u'neramama shemo yachdav. Praise God with me, and we will exalt God's name together. So the word iti and the word yachdav indicates that the praise should be together as one and not on different levels, different volumes. The person making the bracha and the person saying Amen, who is affirming the bracha, are both praising God together as a unit, and therefore their volume of their voices should be together. Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi, Minayin she'ein hamitargem rashai lahagbia kolo yoter min hakoreh. How do we know that the mitargem, the translator, should not raise his voice to be louder than the person who is reading the Torah himself? When they read the Torah, Kriyat Torah, there was a translator who would, after each pasuk, would translate the pasuk into the language of Aramaic, and people would understand it. So the translator should not speak in a voice louder than the person reading the Torah himself. Shneimar, the source is, Moshe yidaber v'Elokim ya'anenu b'kol. Moshe spoke, and God responded b'kol in the voice. She'ein Talmud lomar b'kol. There's no need for the word b'kol. Obviously, if a person speaks, it's with a voice. Umar Talmud lomar b'kol. B'kol lo shel Moshe. The word b'kol means in the same voice as Moshe, that the response and the translation was in the same voice as the reader. Tanya Nami Hachi, a Braita supports this concept as well. Ein hamitargem rashai lagbia kolo yoter min hakoreh. That the translator should not raise his voice louder than the person reading the Torah. And the translator can't be as loud as the reader. The reader should lower his voice so that he can be the same as the translator. In other words, they should both be together on the same level. The Gemara, so here, in other words, this is a Braita which supports the same concept as the Amoraim were suggesting earlier based on the Psukim. Now the Gemara resumes its conversation about Zimun, which is the topic of our Mishnah. Itmar, the Amoraim discussed. Shnayim sha'achlu ka'achat. Two people who eat together. Pligi Rav Yochanan. Rav and Rav Yochanan had a debate about this. Chad Amar, and one said that they want to make a zimun, they can. And the other said that if they want to make a zimun, there's no opportunity for zimun, because zimun is only with three. And that's what the Gemara starts off its search for proofs. Tanan, our Mishnah. Our Mishnah said, this is above on our page, three people who eat together make a zimun. So what do you see? Shlosha in, shnayim lo. Three is three, and three is not two. So the Mishnah says that the zimun, the only Mishnah which introduces the concept of zimun in the Talmud, in the Mishnah, says three. So how can anyone think that two could make a zimun? So the Gemara responds, Hatzam chova. There in the Mishnah, they're discussing the obligation. Chayavim lezamin. Three are obligated. Hacha, here our conversation between Rav and Rabbi Yochanan is reshut, is about the permission, the opportunity, the ability to make zimun. And the point is really that zimun is an experience where a group of people are all benching, ate together and are saying Birkat HaMazon. And the Mishnah introduces this idea that instead of benching individually, they should bench together, and one leader should invite the others to join together, and then therefore they can bench as one. So Obviously one person can't have a zimun because the definition of a zimun is you're inviting others to join with you to do the Birkat Hamazon together. But two people conceptually have no reason why they can't make a zimun. There's two people. Why can't two join their brachot together and make it together? But the Mishnah says three. So apparently three has the obligation, but two, since the same experience and the same logic could be experienced by two, why not give two the opportunity to have a zimun? Why isn't it meaningful for two to have a zimun also? Why only three? Three is the law of the chiyuv, but as a volunteer, why not have two join together and achieve the value of a joint communal blessing? The Gemara goes on to give support to this debate. Tashma, shlosha she'achlu achas chayavin l'zamin ve'ein rishayin l'chalek. This over here is a reference to another Tanaitic statement, which, if you look into the Masorah Shas, we see that this is actually later on in our Perek and Daf Nun, and it's a Mishnah which teaches that three people who eat together, not only are they obligated to do a zimun, but they're not allowed to divide their zimun. V'chein arba, v'chein chamisha, the same with 4 and 5, until 6. 6 people nechlakim could divide because they can have both be in a zimun. But if you have 3, you can't divide. So the Gemara thinks that this is a support. Shlosha in, shnayim lo. 3 people apparently could have a zimun, but 2 people apparently can't have a zimun. Because, as Rashi explains, if 2 could be looking like a zimun, why can't the individual who needs to leave? What's the problem if one person leaves? When you have 3, you still have the zimun maintained with the 2. Apparently, we're not concerned with the one individual missing out on the opportunity of zimun, but we're concerned with the other 2 losing that opportunity. So the Gemara says if 2 people can make a zimun, so why can't the 3 divide and let one person leave and the other 2 still remain with their zimun? So the Gemara responds, Sha'ani Hatam, this is different to Kavalu B'chova Meikara. They were already established as a Chiyav Zimun. Even if 2 people can make a Zimun, they can't divide because then they lose the opportunity to, the proof of the, I just see that the proof of the Gemara might have been from the second case of the Mishnah, where 4 people also can't divide. The Mishnah continued and said, Chen Arba, 4 people can't divide because they would lose their zimun. And maybe it's on that where the Gemara is saying, if 2 can make a zimun, why can't 4 divide into 2? And the Gemara's response is, Shani Hatam, it's different to Kavalu B'chova Meikara, that it was established as an obligation originally. And what that means is, it's better to have an obligation of zimun than a voluntary zimun. Or at least, once you're already established as an obligation of 3, you can't downgrade to an optional zimun of 2, based on the principle that Rashi says, Gadol mitzuva v'yosa mimisha eino mitzuva v'yosa. It's greater to do an obligation than to do a volunteer, at least if you're already established as an obligation. So the reason why 4 can't divide into 2 groups of 2 is because then they would lose the chiyuv, but it's possible that 2 still have the option of making a zimun. The Gemara continues with another attempted proof. Tashma hashamash shahaya mishamish al shnayim hareze ochel imahim al pisha lo nasna lo rishus. A waiter who's serving 2 people is allowed to grab a bite of bread at the table with them, even without asking permission. The reason is because presumably everyone wants to have a zimun. So if the waiter is volunteering to eat with you and give you the opportunity of zimun, you don't need to ask permission because it's so obvious that he's benefiting the group. If you're serving 3, if you're serving 3 people, then that's considered to be inappropriate for the waiter to just join in because maybe they don't want to join with the waiter. and they have a Zimun anyway, so he's not adding any benefit. So what you see is that two people can't have a Zimun, and that's why it's so assumed that they would want the waiter to join them to create the Zimun. So the Gemara responds, Sha'ani Hatam, there it's different, Denichale, because it's still beneficial, even if two people can make a zimun, it's still beneficial for the two people to have the third to create an obligation. The nichalu, the mikvalu, the chova, that it's better to create a chova, like Rashi says, gadol hamatzuva bi'oseh. So even if they had a zimun of two, it could be assumed that they would want to create a zimun of three. In other words, previously we saw that once you have a chiyuv, you can't remove the obligation and make it an option. But here we see that even if you never had a chiyuv, it's considered to be beneficial to upgrade to a chiyuv rather than remain as an option. So the Gemara still has no source, one way or the other, whether zimun could be done with two or not.